So that threw me into a kind of depression for a couple of years. I came back and I just said, forget the whole thing. Yeah, it was Presbyterian, Pentecostal, Baptist, Congregational, then Reformed, and then Anglican, and then Evangelical Free. I'm a mess. I found myself in the sanctuary, kneeling on the floor in the pews, and just asking God to get me through the next 5 minutes. God is very much alive in me now, and I know that I didn't feel it then, but I feel it. I do feel it now.
Join me in glad adoration.
Hey everybody, welcome to Catching Up, the podcast where we catch up with our favorite artists. My name is Rob Barrett and I'll be your host, and today's very generous and very vulnerable guest is Fernando Ortega, and I've been a huge fan for many years. So be sure to subscribe and to like and tell your friends. All right, here's Fernando Ortega. Fernando Ortega, good to see you, my friend.
My friend, it has been years. We both have gray hair now. I don't think we did last time we connected.
I just have a lot less hair. I'm hoping to just not lose any more hair. These last 2 years, I think it's just been all pull out my hair kind of stuff.
Oh, I know. And mine, and I have less than you, because look at that. There's a lot of real estate going on right here.
You have the worship leader haircut. All worship leaders buzz their hair eventually. It's just going to happen. They should just give into it.
You know, that this is just like, I was paying like $60 for a haircut every time I would go. When COVID started, I just bought some cheap, one of those cheap hair clippers from Costco.
The wall hair cutters. Yeah.
Yeah, they are exactly wall. And I just lean over into the bathtub and shave it all off like every 2 weeks. Cheapskate.
That's good. Hey, well, you were born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where you still live, yes?
Yep, this is an Albuquerque home I'm in.
That is awesome.
Or my Albuquerque home, yeah.
Sounds like a song, My Albuquerque Home. 16 albums, at least one book. Do you have more than that one book out?
No, I don't. And I have actually 21 albums.
21. Wow.
Yeah. So, there are a couple of those are EPs.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but 21 collections of songs.
And thousands of concerts. You have a busy tour. I was on your website. You have a busy tour the rest of this year. Where all are you going?
Well, let's see. Next week is Birmingham, and then Santa Barbara at the beginning of the next month. And then I have a few other things. I just can't remember where they are.
That's awesome, man. It's good to see you busy.
Holland, Michigan, and I'm playing here in Albuquerque. So Seattle, Washington. So yeah, there are a few things coming up. Not as busy as I would have liked, because when COVID started, people canceled things right and left. Right. And trying to get things back going again has been really hard.
Yeah. People are excited to get back together, but they're still not really ready. At least about half of us. It's about half and half, Yeah,
that's right.
So tell us about the new book. This is exciting.
Yeah, I wish I don't have a copy of it. I can get one, but it's called Fernando's Birds, Photographs and Tales. So 5 years ago, I bought a new camera. I had like a bazillion American Express points that I didn't even know that I had. And this guy called me up from American Express and said, "You need this. You have 2 million points, 2 million plus points." And so I just bought random stuff. I bought a TV, which I didn't own a TV at the time. I bought a stand mixer for the kitchen because I wanted to start making bread for some reason. I never have made bread still.
I love that.
But the big thing was a camera. Kind of an entry-level Canon, and my friends were all telling me, "Don't get that. Cell phones are great," and blah blah blah. But anyway, I got it. I bought a few lenses for it, and my sister, who's a birder, took me out birding with her, and then I shot a few photos that I thought turned out pretty good. They're horrible now that I look at them, but
at the time,
I mean,
you thought I'm brilliant.
Yeah. So I keep upgrading my camera equipment, and then finally, so then I started, my venue for posting them has been Instagram mostly. And then I would write these captions that were kind of a little, odd, kind of like Jack Handy kind of things, just little blurbs, and they got longer and longer. So some friends in California, Elaine Rubenstein and Shirley Gallatley, are both very artistic people. And they kind of compiled a little, maybe 15 photos with 15 stories that they had found on my Instagram feed, and said, "What do you think of putting a book together that would look like this?" And they formatted it and chose nice fonts and nice colors and everything. And then then we got to work. It took about maybe 8 months to put the whole thing,
Wow.
to pull it together. Yeah, but it was very intense process. Both of those they're both women with big opinions, and really good.
I
big
married one of
opinions.
those.
Yeah. So it was. I would send a photo in, and then no, that's not any good. Then they would choose a photo that I just couldn't stand, and then we'd have all these standoffs. But in the end, their good artistic eye and judgment really helped me put together a really nice book.
Yeah, the product was better for it. When you have the right collaborators, like in my marriage, just to cover my butt there, it's better when you have strong opinions and you work together. So that's good. Ooh, is it warm in here? Is it just me?
Yeah. I'm getting nervous over here too.
How'd the podcast go, honey? Well, why was there only one episode?
I need thee every hour, most gracious Lord.
Hey, so let's go back. Go back to the very beginning. How did you get your start? How did you get going on all this? Back into the music world here.
Oh man, music. I was just telling a kid, like a junior high kid, this the other day. I started playing when I was 6. My parents, we lived on this high school campus, and our neighbors moved away to Europe for a couple of years. And they said, "Can you take care of our piano?" So they just wheeled it over to the house, and
wow,
it was a little upright thing, horrible piano. But I just was immediately drawn to it. All of the kids, I have 3 siblings. We were all drawn to it, but I was always at it while they were out playing and doing these things. And then they decided after a couple of years to give me lessons. That kind of backfired because I didn't like somebody telling me how to play. Or forcing me to read notes or do exercises. But eventually I came around, and I think by the time I was 15, I had a really terrific piano teacher at 15 named Rose Hughes. She was an older woman here in Albuquerque, and she really kind of opened up the possibilities of the piano and music to me, the way she talked, and I think by the time I was 15, everybody said, yeah, he's going to be a musician. So
wow. Did you play more by ear, or are you more of a note reader?
At that time, it was all by note. And then right around that time, I joined a Pentecostal church here in town, and they let me play the piano there, and the bass player would just stand near me and yell out chord names, G, D, C, or G, C, D, G, or A minor, and I would just go bum 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 bum. I don't know if that's a G. If you have perfect pitch, I'm in trouble. But
I do not.
So anyway, that's how I learned. I learned 1, 4, 5 in a bunch of different keys, and then I remember getting to college and Theory 101 with Daryl Randall, fantastic oboe player. He was just talking about we were looking at Bach chorales, and I just, a little light went on, like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been doing all these years. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And
very cool.
It was a cool moment. And then all of a sudden my grades in that class just started really doing it. I was lost in a fog for a couple of months, and then I got it. And so anyway, that was how I learned.
When did you transition into songwriting and then creating? Because like studying Bach chorales and 2-part inventions, which I loved. And I was actually a music theory major. So
oh, wow. Okay.
the most useless of all degrees. But when did you change into then creating?
So during those years in college, I was kind of like a big fish in a small pond, meaning, and what I mean is I was a pretty good piano player. And I hope nobody's watching from those days if I say I was better than most of the kids in there who were pianists. There was others that were way better. But so in my head, I had it in my mind that I was going to go travel around the world and play concertos with the orchestras, of the world. I thought I was going to be this world-class pianist. So I went off to audition after I finished my undergraduate. I went off to audition at like Manus School, Stony Brook, in Rochester, Eastman School, and one more, Manhattan School.
Wow.
And I remember playing it. I blew all the auditions horribly, and this is why I had a friend who was studying at Juilliard at the time. She was a violinist, and she said, "Oh, I'll let you in the practice room." So I was practicing at Juilliard in a really nice little room with a grand piano. I was playing Chopin Ballade in A flat, number 3. And I heard the same piece coming out from down the hall. And I thought, oh my gosh, whoever is playing that is incredible. So I sneaked out of my room and went and looked in the little window, and it was this little girl. I don't even think her feet could reach the pedal. She had to kind of sit on the edge of the bench to touch the pedal. And she was just playing it like a beast. And that was really discouraging. That was the night before my audition started. So I was completely deflated and did terrible. This is coming around to answer your question, by the way. So I failed all those auditions. Then we went up to Rochester to Eastman, and I played for those guys, and it was still the same. I played pretty well, but it wasn't good enough. But as I was leaving, the guy said, "Hey, why don't you read this score?" And they put up some obscure, unknown Beethoven, like an overture to something that he never finished. And It was in the key of C. And so I was just like, and he goes, "What? We want you to play it in F sharp." So on site,
really? Tritone sub. There you go.
This is where all my Pentecostal 1-4-5-1 things came into play, because I could see the leaps, that they were like a 4 to a 5 to a 6 to a 2 or whatever. And I just played it in F sharp, not accurately, but the guy took me out in the hall and he said, "Look, you're not really good enough to be a piano major here, but I could definitely tell you'll make it in the composition theory department." But my ego was so big that I just said, "Nope, I'm a pianist." But so that threw me into a kind of depression for a couple of years. I came back and I just said, forget the whole thing. But I started singing at church, and singing. I was in a Baptist church by then, and it was just a slow transition from wanting to be a classical pianist, and then God thumping me on the head, and then the slow transition into, wow, I really enjoy singing. And then I started writing it, not very good stuff. But then I moved to California, and I met Elaine Rubinstein, who helped me with a book that I mentioned. She was teaching poetry, and I wrote a few songs and asked her to listen to them, and she helped me with the lyrics, and that was really where it started. That wasn't a long answer to your question.
No, it's great. But you need that context. And what's so interesting about that is how much of life do we miss out on when we compare ourselves to others? That story, actually, I went to Eastman, and so we would tell that story about the freshmen come first and they feel really good about themselves. And then the upperclassmen come and they hear them in the practice room, just like you did. And then they want to quit. They want to go home because they don't think they're any good, because we always compare ourselves to others. How much of life do we miss out on because of that?
It's the truth. And also, I think, I think that I've been listening to, Yevgeny Kissin, the Russian pianist.
No, I don't.
There are recordings of him on YouTube playing. At the age of 12, he was already an incredible beast at the piano. He was playing Chopin concertos, Liszt, Tchaikovsky. He could do anything. And I just think I had the wrong idea of how that all works, If you're going to be a world-class pianist, they'll know it by the time you're 10 years old, I think.
Wow.
So that's what my professor always told me. So,
well, but then God pivoted. This is what I love about our God. He pivots and, takes you from what you thought you wanted to do into actually how you were better at doing. And now we have 21 albums out, which you would not have out if you were still playing that Chopin piece.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I love what I do. And when I get on the stage, for the most part, I'm very at ease. Sometimes I get nervous. I get especially nervous if the crowd is really close and there's like 20 of them. I hate those situations. Yeah. But I played a Billy Graham crusade where there were like 45,000 people, and it didn't faze me. I was going to say one other thing, that when you were talking right there about Flannery O'Connor, the short story author from the South who died, I think, in 1969. One of my favorite authors, but she was doing a lecture and some kid raised her hand and said, why do you do what you do? Why do you write? Mm-hmm. And she said, because I'm good at it. And the kids in the class, I think O'Connor kind of described it as they were kind of like, whoa, what a conceited person. But, she was just saying, if you write, if you say that you're called to write, there better be a pretty evident gift that you have. And to say that you're good at it, it's true. God has gifted you to do this thing. And I don't know, I guess that's how I feel about, I finally found what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I feel relaxed in it. I feel competent at it. And I would have been miserable trying to pursue a career.
And I think as I listen through your music, you're still discovering that, what the kind of music, the kind of lane that you're in, when you compare the early stuff to the later stuff, don't you think, I'm in the same place. We're still kind of discovering where we're at musically.
That's the truth. I guess you never really do in the end,
No. Maybe in heaven we'll find out. Oh, you should have been a banjo player. Big bummer.
Yeah.
Was there kind of a moment or a big break that kind of launched you out? So you're in your church, you're writing some stuff. What kind of gave you that we talk about being, like a regional treasure into a national treasure. You at some point were like a regional treasure in California, then you became a national treasure. What was a break or a moment that happened?
Well, it was probably my first record deal, which was a disastrous record deal. But I was playing at a college conference in San Francisco, and this guy, I think he was just stuck. He was flying out of what's the one in San Francisco? One of the airports near the airport. I can't remember. He got stranded, so he just came to the conference, I think is how it went. And he listened to me play, and afterwards he said, "Hey, do you want a record contract?" And he said, "I own a label, and I'm in Texas, so."
Well, that would be it. That's the break.
Well, in a way, I mean, it was
Next
crazy.
question.
I signed the deal without any help from an attorney. I didn't know anything. I just said, "Wow, a record deal," and I signed it. And oh my goodness!
Oh no, publishing issues arise.
Publishing, all these royalty things. I finally got a royalty check maybe 3 years after the thing, and it was for a couple $100, and it bounced. So, and his record label folded and blah blah blah. But from that record, because I had made that record, it got in the hands of another guy, and I got a record deal from a guy in California, another guy in California, with Campus Crusade, and I made, I think, 5 or 6 records with them, and then I signed with. So it was kind of gradual.
Then you were with Myrrh, right? Or then were you with Word?
I went with Myrrh, and then Myrrh folded, and Word kind of absorbed it, and so then I was with Word, and then I was with Curb Records for the last 4 or 5 records.
What was the very first one called? The first album?
Oh, in a Welcome Field.
Oh, okay, yeah.
My kid, I have a 12-year-old, Ruby is her name, and she's quite the hipster. Not hipster, but anyway, she's very hip. And she plays it on the way to, when I'm driving her to school, she plays it in the car to torture me, because I can't stand how over emotive I am. My vibrato's like, I'm
Don
wailing
Francisco?
like, what's that?
Don Francisco?
Yeah.
I'm alive.
Is that right? He's alive. Yeah.
Love that song. We love Don, just for the sake of
We do love, yeah. That song,
that's great.
There's a lot of songs from that guy that saw me through. That's another subject. Just at the point that I finally signed that record deal, artists like Don Francisco, Dallas Holmes. Do you remember Dallas?
I do.
Andre Crouch. I met Andre Crouch at GMA Week, and I went to shake his hand, and then I just started crying. So I shook his hand, cried, and then walked away. And I never even got to tell him.
Good story. That's a good story. So the reason this happened, also give you a little background. My wife and I are sitting around the house one night just a couple of weeks ago, and I was on Spotify, and I'm just searching for old Christian music. We had just seen the film called The Jesus Music. Have you seen that? It's just a documentary about the history of Christian music. I think that's
with Amy Grant.
Yeah, right. And Michael.
Sorry.
It's really good. But we're sitting around, and I'd find this old tune like, On Your Crouch, My Tribute, or Dallas Holmes, and I'd play it and see how long it would take before she would guess what it was. Because we're playing, Chuck Girard and David Meese. And so we ended up making this playlist of all of our favorite songs of our childhood. We put it up on Facebook. You're in there as well. And people just loved it. So if you want to go find like Songs from My Youth on my Spotify page, you'll find all those tunes that we're talking about. And that's what got us interested in this and just catching up with people, people that have been at it for, there's these artists that come out and they have a tune or they have a song that's great. I'm just not really interested in that. I'm interested in people that have been doing it for 30 years, and what have they learned, and what can I learn from that? What can I learn from you? Because, you've been through it. You've had the ups and you've had the downs. And so that's what kind of got this whole podcast idea started, playing those old tunes like that and saying, whatever, where is Chuck Girard, Okay, so one of the things that I put up on Facebook as I was asking people, and I hid you from it so you couldn't see it, but what questions to ask you, and then it kind of shifted into just people were just putting out encouragement stuff for you. So I want to read a couple things that people wrote about you. First of all, Craig Neesing said, just thankful for him and his gift. He has always been my go-to when I need to be lifted up. Becky Waters writes, Jesus, King of Angels is so powerful, lyrically and musically. I love that song so much, as well as his version of Give Me Jesus. His music brings me peace and joy. We get a lot of that. June Bullock, said, I will praise him still has carried our family. The 5 of us sang and taught it at Dave's mom's service, as well as their service for their son, Al, who is a friend of yours. You'll see there's a lot of this with people that have lost sons and have turned to your music.
I will praise him still, for the Lord.
So I just wanted to share this with you. Dave Bullock says, for a short Spanish guy, you've done pretty well for yourself.
That sounds like his sons and Dave have always had something to say about my height. Those guys, oh man, and I miss Al. That's the Bullocks really went through it,
Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in
the early days, Christian artists like you were more singing songs to the audience in concerts, and now it seems like they're more they're worship leaders singing songs with the audience. How has that transformation played in your journey?
For the longest time, I was writing a lot of songs, just kind of finding characters in my life or places in my life and writing about that stuff, like making observations. And I thought, and I really value that, but I just haven't done it that much lately. And I want to get back to it. But, every time I've joined a church, and I've been through a lot of churches, I've listened to the music. I've sat there in the pews and then thought, oh man, I wish there were more songs like this where we are, uniting our voices toward God and saying things about him that are specific to him, and instead of specific about what he's, how my feelings about him sort of validate him, So that's been the focus for a while. I think starting with the record called The Shadow of Your Wings. I wrote that for a friend I wrote the first piece for a friend whose wife had passed, and they were together 44 years, and so that's kind of launched me on the trajectory of writing songs for the church.
Yeah, well, I think that's been a movement throughout all of CCM. People don't do concerts, they do worship experiences, and I think you're seeing that go back now. There's always cycles, but and just seeing, like for instance, you do a lot of hymns, And what someone said, are hymns still relevant today?
And I've thought about that, because I know that like 10 years ago, people were calling me all the time, asking me to talk about the importance of hymns. And I sang in a church this last weekend here in Albuquerque, and I realized that as I was singing, I think, "All Creatures of Our God and King," "On Christ the Solid Rock I Stand." Then I did a Getty's hymn, and then I did one that I wrote. But they were unfamiliar with all of it.
Really?
Yeah. And I wonder now if like 10 years ago, when they were saying, a lot of college kids were clamoring for hymns. I mean, I remember having experiences at Wheaton College and Moody Bible Institute, where a lot of those students were just, "Hey, just teach us a new hymn. Teach us a hymn we've never heard that has great theology." I wonder now if it's been so overwhelmingly moving away from historic church hymns and writings, that now even that is not, hymns are not as important as they were 10 years ago. I don't know. What do you think in your experience?
A friend of mine put it really well. When we hear an old hymn, we think it's worship, but it's actually more nostalgia. In some ways we react to the nostalgia. When young people hear a new song, they think, "Oh, this is really great worship." They're actually reacting to the novelty of it. And I totally think that's true. When you and I hear "All Creatures of Our God and Him," our goosebumps go. And I don't know that the worship has changed as much as our emotional response to that song. So I'm a big hymns guy. I love your settings of hymns. But yeah, I guess time will tell.
Time will tell. And I was telling the congregation, when I saw them just kind of staring at the huge monitor above my head.
Wow.
That, when we sing, "All Creatures," the lyric is from St. Francis from the 1100s. And then I think Ralph Vaughan Williams did the setting. What was going on with the lyrics before Vaughan Williams found it? I don't know. It was just floating in there as
plain song,
I don't know, but,
shape notes.
Yeah. I was just wondering, and I was just telling that when we sing these hymns, in a way, we're kind of, uniting ourselves with generations of Christians that have gone before. That they sang these hymns in various occasions, like when the church was feeling defeat or attack, or when they were feeling victorious. They would sing these, like, "On Christ the Solid Rock I Stand, all other ground is sinking sand," and that it was important for us to have that voice, not just as a novelty, or not just as you said, nostalgia,
Yeah.
But I don't know if they connected with that thought, or
that group felt neither of those. They were just like, what? Maybe it was just novelty because it was new, but yeah, they just didn't connect.
Jesus, lover of my soul, let me to thy bosom fly.
Yeah.
So as we've gone down these last 20 years, how has your view of music in worship, the role of music in worship, changed? I separate those two things out: worship and music. Music has a role in worship, but how has that changed for you?
Well, I think it changed especially when I became an Anglican for a while. I'm not an Anglican anymore, but just because the church I was in went away.
Oh. So assemblies, then Baptist and Anglican. You definitely are following a trajectory there.
Yeah, it was Presbyterian,
Pentecostal,
Baptist, Congregational, and then Seeker driven, then Reformed, and then Anglican, and then Evangelical Free. I'm a mess, but yeah, I don't know how to answer that. But I think I began to see the music and the various aspects of the liturgy, including the sermon, were all kind of co-equal as they led the way to the Eucharist, and that. And so I don't really know how to answer your question. That's not right. I don't know how it's changed. I think I see it as not just something. Well, this is a big change for me, especially when I was in that seeker-driven church. That the music there was just all the purpose of it. It was very utilitarian. It was there to set up the sermon, and then there to recap the sermon.
Right.
And
Right.
then finally, when I got to, Anglicanism, and the sermons were, thank God, only 15 to 20 minutes. And whether the sermon was crap or not, the mass was the thing,
Huh.
And so they were all kind of co-equal. And I found that very freeing on some weird level as I tried to write. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned that, hymns tie us to the history of the people that have come before us, at least for the last couple hundred years, since the 1600s. What I found in you both of us from the year 2011, for instance, the industry had changed so much. You're writing a setting of the Latin Mass, your Kyrie.
Kyrie eleison.
Toby Mac singing, get on back, so you're definitely finding your own path in the Christian field, but I think that allows you to do is not just connect with the people for the last 400 years, but connect with people for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah,
the Mass,
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was yesterday or the day before, somebody sent me a note, a private message on Instagram, saying that she was Anglican as well. She said, our priest asked me to ask you, why have you not written the Mass yet? So my mind for the last 2 days has been on that. I want to do that. I really want to. I need to figure out how to do it, and how to do it so that it could be, perform or celebrated in any church anywhere USA. But anyways, it's set me on a path. Like I think I'm inspired to do something like that.
Yeah, well, it connects us. It connects us with the millions and millions of people that have sung those words in reverence to our God for the past 2,000 years.
I think it was Os Guinness. He
not personally, but I know of him. Yes.
Yeah. He said we were at a Ravi Zacharias thing years ago, and he was glad that I was doing hymns and some of the old hymns, and I think I had already written Trisagion then. So those words are from the apostolic era, and he said, that all of our worship should encompass the centuries, or should span the centuries. And when we do that, then we're truly being radically contemporary, that we take some lyrics from the apostolic era and set them to music now that is now. And that's the healthy way to think about worship.
A Latin Mass rap, for instance, maybe is something you could consider for.
Oh yeah. Picture me rapping. Can you imagine?
Talk about your creative process. How do you write? Just get some nuts and bolts here. What is your creative process?
Well, I usually come up with music first. That's kind of the standard process, music or lyrics first. Sometimes I have lyrics first, but I find that if I've got music and a melody and chords that are compelling, it can set the mood for me to start thinking what the music is suggesting, like what mood of it, or if it's, I don't know, something dark and brooding, But sometimes when I'm working on this happened recently. I was working on writing, setting some music to a hymn that I didn't like. I like the hymn lyrics, but not the melody. But not the music. And for me, it's all about painting the text with maybe tensions in the chord, or that's nothing new. Classical guys have been doing that for forever.
Yeah.
But it's kind of random, I guess, the way I write. I just recorded this Bob Dylan song called Dark Eyes, and it's a kind of a cryptic thing. I really still don't know what it's about, even though I've worked on it for the last 3 months. Finally finished it a couple of days ago. And but trying to paint these lyrics, I think he was like right around his Christian phase when he wrote them. But it's about am I going like rambling too much about this?
No.
Really? So okay. He was coming back from a show in New York City when he was a young man, and he past this prostitute in the hall, and she looked very lost and very sad, but he thought she was just beautiful, and so but he couldn't get her eyes out of his head. I guess there was a lot of makeup or something. So the song is called Dark Eyes. And I think it's about like the exploitation of women by these men, but also that she was in this place that she couldn't rise out of it, And so there's this one line in there that said, where it's talking about sadness. A cock is crowing far away, and another soldier's deep in prayer. Some mother's child has gone astray, and she can't find him anywhere. But then he says, but I can hear another drum beating for the dead that rise. And on that point, so I had this thing, the music kind of going down, but when I can hear another drum, it starts to go up, like in the melodies and in the harmony. I even had my daughter Ruby sing a little thing that makes the word dead that rise sound like it's kind of ascending.
But I can hear another drum beating for the dead that rise, whom nature's beast fear.
I don't know. Maybe it's kind of anal of me that I think about it. So focusing in on one line like that, but that is a weird way of kind of explaining the process I go through when I write or arrange.
Okay, some more encouragement. Craig Olson says, grace and peace encompasses everything I've ever loved about finding a way to mix worship with classical thought and arranging. Josiah says, give me Jesus. And I remember singing it and learning it as a kid. I still sing it sometimes to my daughters as I rock them to sleep.
Which one is that one?
This is from Josiah Neely. He's a pastor here. Nathan Kwolek says, if there was ever a Rich Mullins 2.0, it would most definitely have to be Fernando. He is truly, in every sense of the word, a ragamuffin extraordinaire.
I have something to say about each of those things. Well, the first one was Grace and Peace. I mentioned my friend that died when I wrote that album is the one I was talking about, Shadow of Your Wings. I was sitting behind my friend at the funeral, and he was so in love with his wife, and she died very suddenly from, like, she got the flu and then she was dead within a couple of days. But as he was just bent over in grief, and I said, what could I sing over this guy to and the melody to Grace and Peace was churning in my mind, and those words, grace and peace to you from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's where that song came from. So it was kind of timely that he said that. The Rich Mullins thing is funny because I met him I think I met him twice. Once was in a studio that we were recording in the same building, and he had just seen for the 11th time Dances with Wolves. So he so we talked to, he saw it 11 times. Maybe he saw it by the end. I think by now I've seen it maybe 4 times in my life because I like it. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And then after he passed, I went on the road with the Ragamuffins. I opened for the Ragamuffins.
Did you really?
Yeah. And Mitch McVicker, who was in the accident with Rich, he and I both opened. So wow. I think we both got 15-minute slots, and then those guys, and they were so ragamuffin. Very, very cool guys to hang out with.
Wow. Let's talk about the industry for a little bit. You've been in the industry for all these years, and you've had your issues with the machinery of the Christian music business, and you were with Word and you were with Myrrh. What are the major issues for those outside looking in, and what do you think? You think it's getting better?
I don't know if it's getting better. I think it's so different now. Unless you're like a big old star who needs to have your stuff managed, and that, I think you're better off without a label these days. I'm not positive about that, but people make some pretty good music that, and they get well known, they get exposure just on YouTube, like these influencers and all that stuff. But some of the stuff my kid plays me, and they get millions of hits and millions of plays.
Yeah.
I think back then I was kind of disturbed at, like there was such an emphasis on youth. I remember the label guys that I was dealing with from Myrrh, they came out to sign me, and then we met and we had a really good meeting, but then they asked halfway through, how old are you? And I said, how old are you, by the way? And I said, I'm 35. And they both like, whoa, so we thought you were in your 20s. And then I think there was a waiting period where they had to really think it through. Did they want to sign somebody as old as 35?
Really?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great to be 35 now?
Can you imagine? Look at this. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
But yeah, so no, these guys were really good guys, and they still are good guys, and they are still very good friends. But I think the pressure of it was so image oriented. I guess it's a big money making machine no matter what. It's a way, it's business, and I've always had a hard time calling what I do, especially in those days, since I was going on the road on a tour bus and selling CDs and coffee mugs and t-shirts and fanny packs or whatever we had out there. And then saying, calling my thing a ministry, because
that's where it gets murky, right? Whenever we're mixing business and ministry, it's always gets a little gray there all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was something I had a hard time with. I struggled with the entire time.
Yeah.
So I would rather make to distinguish music for the church and then other music, like, music
Right.
for the church is one thing, and then there's everything else, and that includes contemporary Christian music. It's not music for the church. It's just falls in the category of music that happens to be Christian.
It's one of the few art areas where we make that distinction. So, when you got started, Christian music had its own radio stations, its own bookstores, its own record labels. Myrrh didn't have any secular artists, and you wouldn't be sold in Tower Records. It was completely divided between the Christian art side and the secular art side. Now
Right.
you think of you're in photography, you don't think, well, I'm a Christian photographer.
Right. Yeah.
You're a photographer. But we made such a huge, and still today make such a huge delineation between those two camps. And it's something I've struggled with all my life. I don't know the answer, but we don't think of us as a Christian potter unless you're always making, putting crosses in every single pot that you make. You're not only taking,
Right.
you're taking bird photos, and your photos are worshipful. Let's be very clear about this. Like your photos of the bird will inspire me to worship as much as any of your songs did. But I don't think of you as a Christian photographer.
Yeah, and I think of the bird photographers that I follow on Instagram. There are some fantastic ones. I have no idea what they believe. You don't ever, unless they're photoshopping little crosses on the eyes of the birds or something like that.
Irises.
But, yeah. So no, that's a good point. That Christian music was, it was. What I think I resented about it was that it was never very overtly Christian. The song, and you've heard, this is cliched to say, but the song could easily have been about some girl you like, or Jesus. You know what I mean? It was vague enough.
Some of it was, other others it was more overt, but yeah, there's certainly,
Yeah.
you're
Well,
probably encouraged to ride that line from your label. It's like, hey, it's the 90s, we need to cross over, like Baby or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. It was just a weird time, and I think it's all past, don't you? I mean,
yeah.
None of those those big labels aren't around.
We don't really have Christian bookstores and Christian. we still have the radio, I think, is pretty much separate, but Spotify isn't. There isn't a Christian Spotify and a secular Spotify. You can mix and match, on any of those streaming services. And that really has kind of broken down the barriers, I think, in some ways anyways.
Yeah.
Were your dealings with labels mainly positive or mainly negative?
Mainly positive.
Wow. That's amazing.
I think if there was tension, I caused it by myself, just being, thinking I was this young artist and these guys were trying to, put me into this mold or blah, 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 but I loved my days at Myrrh and Word. They were really fun. There was the business side to deal with. And sometimes, we would argue about whether I wanted them. I never wanted my face on the cover of my record. And they always thought that was like a big deal. To have your face on it. Yeah. I just have never liked pictures of myself.
You have such a nice face.
Oh yeah. nice and round. I think that my hard days were with Curb for various reasons. And that was not
those were the last four. The last four were with
Curb. Yeah.
Curb.
Yeah. There was the Christmas record. There was Shadow of Your Wings. There was a self-titled one, and then there was one more, which I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, those were tough days, just because their legal team and all that it was a bit on the cutthroat side. Yeah.
Well, you did some great work. A little bit more encouragement for you, Bob Coughlin. If you know Bob from Glad. He says, I've always appreciated his commitment to beautiful and simple musical arrangements that point us to Christ, and whiz our paths had crossed more frequently. We sing his song, Our Great God, at Sovereign Grace Church often.
Wow.
And when Preble wrote, he was a major voice of God. Praise God for the impact of his music and the depth of faith that spoke and still speaks to so many. And here's a story from my friend Joy. When our son Louis was a tiny baby, I went to one of your Fernando's concerts about 45 minutes away. Louis was in his car seat and cried and screamed the entire time. By the time I reached the venue, my nerves were splintered. I picked him up, took him into the church, and found a seat by the end of the pew in case I needed to escape with the screaming baby. By this time he was quieting down, and once Fernando began singing, Louis fell sound asleep in my lap. He remained that way the entire concert, and I got to de-stress, breathe, and just take in the beauty of the songs. I'll never forget that night. 15 years later, after Louis took his life, Fernando's songs still minister to me each Thursday night around the exact hour of his passing. I would take a hot bath and listen to Fernando's songs just to make it through the night. Jesus, King of Angels, was everything to me.
Jesus, King of Angels, heaven's light. Shine your face upon this house tonight.
Oh my gosh, that's
the impact you've had, man.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that story. That's a really hard one to hear. Wow. I mean, I don't.
Yeah. So, we're artists, and, we know the ups and downs, and you've been pretty transparent, I think, with, some of the depression or issues that we deal with. How are you doing today? And what would you say to someone who's in that space right now?
Oh, I've struggled with depression off and on for years, a couple of decades. My depression showed itself up in anxiety, and I had these pummeling bouts of panic attacks for years. I just thought I didn't know how to deal with them. I remember toward the end of when they finally started to go away, and that I was working on staff at a church, and I had developed these social anxiety. So I found it unbearable to just even talk to the church secretary or the receptionist.
Wow.
Just because I don't know how to describe it, but it was extreme anxiety. And I found myself in the sanctuary, kneeling on the floor in the pews, and just asking God to get me back into the office and get me through the next 5 minutes. Wow. And I crawled my way through life for 2 years like that. And, in the end, God did deliver me.
What did that look like? How did you get out of that spiral?
I don't know. My last panic attack was probably 6.5 years ago. And I don't have social anxieties anymore. Sometimes it'll creep up a little bit, but I'm very hesitant to make a promise to somebody, hey, these things are going to go away, but I have a friend who struggles with it now, who struggled with it as long as I have. This guy who's just a great guy, it's a family guy and everything, but he has just chosen to just cling to God, and he's strong because of it. His faith is really strong. But I feel like my encouragement would be to just not despair. Yeah, I believe that God is with us, even though we can't see it. And I don't know why we go through those things. I begged God so many times, just please don't let me go through this anymore. And it would just happen again and again and again. And then finally, I was kind of delivered from it. There was nobody. Maybe there were people praying for me. People were telling me all the time. My pastor back then, Josh Swanson, a really, really good pastor, prayed for me and went for walks with me. When I told him I'm crushed inside, I don't even know how to talk to anybody. We would walk around the block and he'd just listen to me and cry with me and everything. I don't know.
Well, clearly that made you a better person.
Yeah.
God didn't just immediately take it. Oh, I feel sad. Boom, take it away. And you didn't get to go through the journey of overcoming that. What do you think you learned, or how did that change you going through that period?
Oh my gosh. Well, it changed me in that I know that I could hear people's stories before I went through all this, when I was in a more cocky kind of guy, and just kind of like say, oh, come on, you can just snap out of it. I definitely have, a much deeper empathy for people that I didn't have before. It's just like losing my mom in May of 2020. I read people's stories, and when somebody says they lost their mom, I just, I can feel it with them, and what that's like. So I guess there's that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just made me deeper. I think it's made me closer to my kid. She's just now becoming a teenager, and she's going through some stuff, and we just, I feel like I can be there in the trenches with her a little bit more than I could have before all this stuff.
That this good day, it is a gift from you. The world is turning.
So, over the past couple of years, you've had some changes in your family structure that have been, I think, rough. How has that affected you?
Yeah, well, it's 8 years ago. My wife Margie left.
Sorry.
And yeah, I think that's probably the darkest moment of my whole life. And then a lot of my anxiety was tied up in all that. And after she left, it got worse and worse. And I didn't see it coming. And we were in counseling, and the counselors kept telling me it'll be fine, and then it wasn't fine. So she left, and I had to face, what made this happen. And I knew a lot of the stuff. I was not easy to be married to. I wonder if anybody is. I don't know. It's hard work.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not either. I wasn't either. But I think, neither was she. But it was okay. I just didn't have the thought of, I'm just going to bail on this thing, But for her, it was just not an option. She just felt she had to be gone. And so,
what did you learn? How did that change you, or how is that, so once again, God comes alongside you and carries you through that. How has that made your relationship with him richer, or what did you learn from that?
Well, I did learn that, like, at first I was so angry with God, and that it had happened. And I think I learned that I was able to say a lot of stuff to him that was really bad. Like I was just mad at him, and he didn't go away from all that stuff.
Yeah.
There are many, many moments in my prayer life that I'm not proud of, accusing God of things and doubting him, deep doubt. But there was so much despair there. I didn't think I would make it through that stuff. As depressed as I was, I didn't really want to be alive anymore, to be honest. And like I mentioned, my pastor Josh, he would come over and just sit on the floor and cry with me. He loved us, loved Margie and me together, and that's how he met us, you know. And so there was just that deep mourning. But yeah, I mean, God is very much alive in me now, and I know that I didn't feel it then, but I feel it. I do feel it now.
Wow.
And maybe that's, you know, maybe me waking up to him, I would say, and him coming more alive in me is what lifted those panic attacks and that hideous depression and all that stuff, you know, and anger and all those things. But I'm still here, and I'm still a Christian. You know, there's so many people right now that I know that are going through this deconstructing their faith thing.
Yeah.
And I see it everywhere. And I'm glad that I'm not in that place, because the last thing I needed when all this stuff happened was to start deconstructing my faith. I needed it. You know,
right.
You
need the rock.
Yeah, you need the rock. I was driving my kid home from school the other day, and you know, she's in this kind of place where she's not sure what she believes.
How old is she?
She's 12.
Yeah, that's.
And her school is pretty progressive, I guess, is how some might describe it. But I was just talking to her about the beauty of Christianity in the world, you know.
Yeah.
And it seems like you look anywhere, you look at movies and you look at culture and you look at school culture and music. It just is this vast areas of godlessness. Like, people just live as though God does not exist. And I was just saying that it doesn't really matter, because God is establishing his kingdom on the earth in us and through us. And he's not daunted by any of this stuff the way we're daunted, you know?
Yeah.
And that the way he came, you know, in the most humble manner, coming through a birth canal and his head being held up because he couldn't, you know, feed like any baby. But Mary, he created Mary, but here he is suffering himself to just be completely dependent on her. And then to the point of, you know, of dying on the cross. He came in the humblest way, left in the humblest way, and then rose. And here he is, and here he remains. Anyway, I gave her this long sermon that lasted the entire ride home from school. And I think it kind of hit a mark in her anyway. It sure did in me. It felt good to say all this stuff, you know.
Well, at the end of this, we're going to pray for you. And since you're entering into the teenage years, we know kind of how to pray for you. Hey, you know, that was a great word, and I kind of want to end with that. But let me give you some more encouragement from some people. So Bob Price says, your music allows me to shut off the noise of music and contemplate God. Thank you for your honesty and your profound inspiration as you sing and write and perform. Hannah Dene says, thank you for saying yes to what the Lord was speaking to and through you. Each song has carried so many different seasons, but your simple yes to the Holy Spirit provided that. Solveig Peterson writes, after meeting him and playing for his orchestra hall concert here in town, I played hymns and meditations 24/7 and never even turned it off when I went to work. It had a profound influence on me. And of course, touring with him was the highlight of my career. You've been such a blessing to her.
Yeah, so that was when we were touring the record, Shadow of Your Wings.
Yes.
So I was with the string quartet, and she was the cellist in the quartet.
Yeah, and that was the highlight. So thank you for doing that for her. That you've meant so much to her.
Yeah, and she to me, we're still friends. We still can communicate on Facebook all the time. So
that's cool.
Savior, like a shepherd, lead us. Much we need thy tender care.
So we're glad you soldiered through all this stuff. You've been such an encouragement to people. People wanted to be an encouragement to you.
Oh, man.
How can we pray
Thank
for you?
For that.
I want to pray for you here.
Hey, just pray.
Teenage years.
That's a big deal. I mean, yeah, please pray for me and Ruby. We're great. We're great friends. But just for that I know how to be for her in, as she faces the stuff that she faces on a daily basis, with all the emotions that they go with it.
Yeah, I know. I have a 23 and a 26-year-old, so I'm glad to be on this end of that chasm that you're just
and you're
starting
so
to
much young. You're so much younger than I am, aren't you? Or I don't know how old you are.
Yeah, that's
But
that's none of your business.
that's in your business. I'm
My
64.
weight and my age will stay myself.
Oh my gosh! So I'm 64 and I have a 12-year-old, and that's kind of crazy. But
Wow, yeah, I'm 50. I'm 56. So
I knew
it's
that.
good to be
Yeah.
past. Hey, let me pray for you, Heavenly Father. I just lift up Fernando to you and Ruby, and I just pray that you'll bless their relationship, that you'll give Fernando just the right words at times, and for her, and to be silent at the right times, and you'll help him be the good listener. Give him wisdom as he parents, and guides her through these really tough years here in our American culture. So, Lord, we just pray favor and blessing over him as a father and over Ruby as a daughter, Lord. We pray for Fernando's career, Lord. You would just let this next chapter be the very best chapter, that you would just let him be fruitful and pour forth songs from your spirit, and record lots and photograph lots and write lots, Lord, that you would let this next chapter be the most fruitful chapter ever. And you would use him to encourage people so much as you have in the past. Lord, we just pray a blessing and favor over Fernando's life in every way, shape, or form, financial, relationship-wise, church-wise, faith-wise, Lord, that you would just be more real to him than you ever have been before. We pray these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Hey, buddy, have a great next chapter. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Very encouraging.
Good. Hey, blessings to you. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
My soul praise him, for he is thy health and salvation.
I was singing at Vision New England up in Boston, and Elizabeth Elliot walked in, and I was like, oh my God, while I'm singing, I didn't sing Give Me Jesus at that point. And then I said, I've been working on this arrangement of hymn, Give Me Jesus. I'd like to dedicate this performance to Elizabeth Elliot, who has been a huge influence on my life. So I sang it, and I was trembling and everything, like it was a very emotional moment for me. And then she came back afterwards with her grandson, and I said, so what did you think of the song? And she goes, frankly, I prefer a more robust voice. And then, so,
Frankly, my dear.
Well, and then after that, I got to work with her on a number of occasions, and I just recognized that, yeah, she's about as blunt as she meant it too. I don't think I was ever her favorite singer, but